everyone, and welcome to this evening's edition of Literary Nights with Unsolicited Press. Before we get started, I'm going to ask you to smash the like button and follow us wherever you're watching us on YouTube or Instagram. Also, I want to remind you that if you want to leave a comment or ask a question of our wonderful authors, you could do so in the comment section, and we will definitely see them, and they will answer your questions and comment on your comments in real time. And it is the year of the woman at Unsolicited Press. And tonight, joining us is Leanne Pickrell and Catherine Shea. And they're going to read some poetry and some fiction this evening. The name of Leanne's book is "Gathering the Pieces of the Day," which is poetry, and Catherine is going to read from her book, which is very intriguing, about finding haunting places among the ordinary. So, welcome, ladies. Welcome, everyone who's watching. Thanks for joining us. So, we usually go in alphabetical order. So, Catherine, that puts you first with the C. So, thanks for joining us, and we hope to hear more about your wonderful work.
Okay. Well, it's great to be here tonight with everyone. I just love what you're doing, Rosalia. I really appreciate your hosting this Literary Nights with Unsolicited Press. And the title of my poetry book is Ghost Matinee. I don't know if you can see that, Ghost Matinee. And it's coming out April 22nd. You can order it now on Unsolicited Press. I'm going to start, I've got a few poems here. My poems tend to cover, the personal, the political, the geopolitical, the world in general, And I came up with this Ghost Matinee title from a line in one of my poems. I'm not sure if I'm even reading that poem tonight. That's kind of funny. But anyway, I'm going to start with a poem called Mannequins Yearning for Eye Contact. While visiting Santa Fe, which feels a world away from my home state, I'm disoriented, tripping upon a lacuna where monuments once stood to honor the extermination tactics of Diego de Vargas and Kit Carson and the Indian Wars, America's real longest war. Here, the monuments that should have been to Pueblo and Navajo were never built, never mentioned in the margins of my school year textbooks. Part of existence that's toppled in this new day. Back home in Marin, the county named for Coast Miwok Chief Marin, under a sky dimmed with fall fires, I drive west to hike the beach trail at Abbott's Lagoon, named for two brothers who grabbed the land in 1858 for dairy ranching. I seek escape from the remembrance of amended history, eyeless busts and statues across the land erected to glorify crimes. Their sightless gazes akin to mannequins desperate for eye contact. Named for a Southern Pacific Railroad land agent who nobody seems to remember. Redding, the town I grew up in, overlooking the Sacramento, had cornerstones we ignored on brick buildings from the mid-1800s. No generals I knew of atop bronze horses. As if to pretend that lands weren't stolen, the first peoples weren't massacred. Modoc, Wintu, Yana, Pitt River, and Klamath River tribes, like there was nothing to remember. The historic brothels and saloons have been demolished now, transplanted by parking lots. Away from history's rubble, at the western limits of the continent, weight of the atmosphere presses down on me, Sand in my face, water doused. I feel the collapse of sea foam, the sweet talk of Pacific spray, trying to convince me the past won't be repeated. Yeah, so you can see there's a little theme there. Lots of past to haunt us. Here's another one. The mystery of Antarctica's sea ice has been solved. Fundraisers where happenings are staged and babies kissed. Flesh is pressed like ruined leather. The machine provides a robotic hug to ease anxiety. It's bad form to curse during breakfast. Everyone aglow over the double yolk egg. Go ahead and keep your loose change for the phone sex of a bygone era. You might need it. Glaciers calve in spectral night, their bone-cracking din conspiring to end all. Thank you for the alarm and the bond to antiquity, obsolete geography. An oddity of austral spring, a hole known as a polynya, grown to the size of the Netherlands, grows to the size of the Netherlands, this name apt, as in sunk. How I disdain warnings and predictions. Bury my head in new clothes. I love my closets. They're graceless mess. Here's one that is a little more, let me see, wait a second, the next one I had. Okay, well, I guess I'm still on an earth kick here. Okay, so farewell to old earth. If you stare intently, you can see the sky seems to imprint itself with the ever so faint suggestion of the new dimension we are sure to enter. That is, those of us lucky enough to be chosen for the voyage to the vast, rapturous heaven that supplants the habitat of old earth. Creatures left behind will be vaporized, leaving vacant the country roads, main streets, and weird needle-like towers that will become shrines to extinct civilizations. Some of us will want to go back to explore old Earth, to observe the results of tests and projects to save the wicked planet. But there are those of us that don't feel like we'll miss old Earth. We believe the new home waiting for us, cold and shiny and nice, is full of promise, like all those advertised afterlives.
Several people have said it's not broadcasting on YouTube.
Oh, I don't have information on it.
Are they at the Unsolicited Press channel?
They should be on Unsolicited Press Literary Nights, right?
It's on the channel.
Yeah.
I'm going to go right now.
Okay.
And check it.
Okay.
It looks like we're on. We started 9 minutes ago.
Yeah.
We're on.
Oh, there are two. Maybe try the other one.
It looks like we're on. We started 9 minutes ago. Yeah, it's repeating me now. We're on. The viewers have to go to Unsolicited Press's channel on YouTube in order to watch.
It seemed to say Unsolicited Press Literary Nights, and it's like a channel.
Yeah, it's Unsolicited Press is the channel, and then the show is Literary Nights with Unsolicited Press. So you have to tell all your fans and friends that they have to go to YouTube, search for Unsolicited Press. Once they subscribe there. They don't have to subscribe; they can just listen. But it's running now.
Okay. They were on the wrong channel.
Oh,
Oh,
all right.
okay. You
Sorry.
can,
Well,
I didn't
welcome
mean to
everyone.
interrupt.
Welcome. If you want to put a comment in, you can, and we will see it. If you want to ask our authors a question, you will see it. And we hope Catherine will be continuing her reading.
okay, I'm continuing my reading because I've read about 3 poems, but I'm not going to go back, and I'm going to continue with some more poetry. And this one is a little bit of, you can be the judge whether it's racy or not, but for me, it's probably kind of racy. Okay. The undercover activity of poplars. I caught them this dawn, blinking their leaves in code. The way they touched, I knew they were exchanging intimacies. Their fluttering entranced me, turned pages in my brain, and I entered this pulp romance of a past lover tumbling in oatgrass. Chambray shirt, unbuttoned, me spread like a picnic, back sticky with sap. Then my poplars let go and tipped their crowns in a hasty farewell when you woke up. And I said hello to the morning sun, our day just swelling. So that's a little break from my ecological poems. No. Okay. So let's see what else we got here. This is, yeah. You know how you have some poems you really like? Well, I shouldn't say anything, but kind of like the ideas here. Every bit of it mine. My prairie, every bit of it mine. The grasses, the buffalo, the aquifers, the arrowheads, bleached bones, prairie dogs, all are mine. Ashes in the grate of this country are mine. Frayed wings of seized birds, their absence. The beardless face of the moon with its stained teeth and pockmarks. My millennium, riches to leave my children. Begin the begin without singing it, without dancing. Just begin the begin, like my father would say at 6 o'clock. My sisters and I fussing over dolls, over cartoons, mother's automation in the kitchen, antimacassars on the recliners, murderous for a cocktail, rye, agave nectar, tamarind paste, a splash of lime over a big rock. Truly, just discount vodka, plain, but the ice cube is real. Bliss with a touch of deja vu. Slant glow of the cathedral sunset in the picture window, the coffee table pitted like a dartboard from kids attacking it, and the arched proscenium stuffed animals, baby rhinoceros, hyena, and zebra trotted out with grave ceremony. Glory above them in the shape of birth and all its moods, snorting, laughing, braying. What is the name of this knowledge? Parenthood is inadequate. The academia I never had. Cars spat at the bushes along the road past pink and green and purple houses, the golden cables of the bridge stable on 101 under the elbows and knees of the fog rolling in. An ice sculpture of words awaited me on the job. No time for gymnasiums or enticing perks. Only well-ruined hips and a sublingual pill of persistence until deadlines slapped me like a 2-stroke engine. I rejected academia after college when I absconded to a corporate job, a chain letter that kept going, away from daily motherhood, my poor latchkey kids. Does it matter how much I love them now? They were abandoned then, and I would scrape myself home late in the long, bad commute, disassemble in the kitchen, then drain the family to bed. I know that sounds pretty horrible, but I really worked hard and I had a terrible commute, and it really, the family suffered. That's kind of, I think you get the message. Okay, I don't know. Yeah, I'm almost ending here with this is my last poem. I think this gives Leanne hopefully more time. The secret's hidden in a pear tree. All my pretty sins, so small. I think they are important enough to admit to the pear tree in the backyard. I don't attend church anymore, and I've devised my own sacrament of confession. I took the Lord's name in vain. I said fuck 3 times. No one even heard me. I carried a secret in my womb after my second child was born. I wanted more children. I wanted to become pregnant over and over, at least 6 more times. I wouldn't have latchkey kids. I'd stay home, change poopy diapers, chase toddlers, finger paint, and bake Play-Doh all day long. I never told anyone, least of all my husband. Instead, I told the pear tree, and I took the pill. Thank you, everybody. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your work with us, and really wonderful work. And now we're going to hear Leanne's poetry, and we're going to tell us a little bit about your book, Leanne.
Great. Thank you for doing this and for having us. I think it's such a great opportunity. And so my book is Gathering the Pieces of Days. And I'm going to read the preface, which will actually kind of explain how I put the book together and kind of the whole idea behind it. On the first day of 2018, I set myself the task of writing a page each morning about the day previous. At the end of a week, beginning with Monday and ending with Sunday, I would take those 7 days and create a page or so of what struck me about that week. In 2019, I took those 52 weeks and wrote a poem for each week of 2018. It took me a year to complete them and several months of revisions, and then the COVID-19 pandemic swept the world and we shut down. Gone suddenly were the coffees with friends, trips to the Oakland Symphony, Oakland A's baseball games, long dinners, concerts, traveling, gatherings we held every year, chance encounters. We no longer said hello with pecks on the cheek or hugs. Maybe a handshake, or even a handshake, maybe an elbow bump, but mostly we stepped away from each other at least 6 feet and waved. We canceled vacations, family get-togethers, weddings. We covered our faces with masks. And I started to wonder if any of these poems of ordinary life mattered. At moments, it seemed we would never go back to the way it was, or if we even should. Certainly many things needed to change. And now that our lives are crowded again with deadlines and obligations, family and friends, calendars whose days are full, I find myself forgetting that for 1 year, I paid close enough attention to capture those moments. If I learned anything from the pandemic, it's this: how precious the pieces of each day are, and how easily and unexpectedly they can be scattered and lost. So the poems are all arranged by month and week. So this is January 2. I gather the pieces of days, of waking and the sun's rise, hidden by the night storm, drops and plops of rain on the roof, a grumpy, soggy day of stomping in rain puddles, I meet a friend for an afternoon latte, and still the white strands of Christmas lights weep from the tree's branches, like twinges of self-pity I call sad. Dinner is a stew of January's leftovers. Afterward, at a friend's open house, a man asks, "What inspires your poetry?" I hate that question.
Yeah, right.
February 2, Saturday afternoon, and I hike the Belgium Trail to the site of a sanitarium where the wealthy once sent their insane, alcoholic, and drug-addled. The park sign describes Friday night dances where cows now graze among palm trees and the remains of a crumbled foundation hidden in grass, where I sit among them holding three deaths in 2 weeks in my hand. The uncle who loved farming and building mechanical things, Mimi, the godmother of bangles and beads, and Henry the cat who kept me here, awake on this earth, who let me hold him as we drove down the hill to the vet, looking around at the view, then back at me, quiet and still. March 4. One of the things I love, is our baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan. Unfortunately, I'm a huge Oakland A's fan. So I'm a recovering Oakland A's fan, but they figure prominently in this book. March 4. The wonder of rain and more rain, mud and puddles, lobster ravioli with shrimp and avocado, clouds parting to blue sky, Mexican mochas. At the symphony, Rossini and Schubert, overtures and preludes, soul restoration, a tribute to Oakland, Lake Merritt and Eastmont Mall, Huey Newton and the Black Panthers, East 14th and International Boulevard, MC Hammer and Run DMC. Sunday afternoon and the first game of the season, an exhibition game between the A's and the Giants. We're robbed of a home run and outplayed, but we have a clear sight line to home plate, and the sun warms our back, and it's spring again. April 4. Who will read these poems of ordinary life, of days I can hardly remember, of overreactions when a client asks, "Did you send the index to layout?" And I explode, "Fuck this," and slam my fist down on the desk. Of Josh saying, "That's really not an appropriate way to act." Of walks through tall grass and wildflowers, more poetic. Of raising my hands overhead, "Hello world, good morning." Of seared flat iron steaks, bread pudding with mushrooms, pappardelle with spicy pork ragu. Of conversation light and animated. Of a rift that leads to a night together but separate, doing our own things. Of going through photos and seeing in my face, my mother's face exact. Of trees and roof lines and a deep blue-green bay, of earth and its curves. I'm gonna skip ahead to September. And this poem was inspired by a trip that my partner and I took to Dallas to see my mom and to the State Fair of Texas, which I grew up going to. I decided I wanted to go back to the State Fair, but we had this incredible interaction with this couple from Houston. And my mom, she probably wouldn't call herself an activist, but she really was an activist. She fought to integrate the schools in Dallas. She really believed that every child deserved a good public education, no matter where or who they were. And unfortunately, that is now under attack by the current administration again. So that's kind of the setup for the poem. September 4. The first full week of autumn, and Big Tex welcomes us to the State Fair of Texas with howdy folks and Fletcher's corny dogs. After the pig races and arroyos con leche, fried rice balls with Bluebell vanilla ice cream, we sit with a Black couple from Houston, where my mother taught at the same school the man later attended. They talk education and hurricanes, developers developing in flood zones where poor people live, his work as a minister, hers as a teacher, segregation and integration, court-ordered busing in the 1970s, more than 20 years after Brown. My mom tells him how she ran for the school board and lost, that she was on the Urban League, appointed to the tri-ethnic committee by the judge who ordered busing in Dallas. The man tells her, "You're a hero." Then turning toward me, he says, "Your mom is a hero." She responds before I can. Oh, she was always so irritated with me then. I was 13 in middle school. It was 1976, and I didn't understand what she was risking. She says, "My husband used to say, 'Marianne, if you don't stop, we're going to wake up to crosses burning on our lawn.'" I decide I'm going to tell her. I think she's a hero too. Before I leave to fly back home to Oakland into the unexpected fog of late September, but I don't. And then October 3. 11 people, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, massacred at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, a naming service to celebrate new life. Rearranging the living room, rearranging lives that shouldn't need rearranging. I drift in a dense, fogged-in forest at the edge of a bog, the start of a dream, before my eyes open and I'm back in my seat at the concert of Danish jazz. On our walk, the sounds of children cut the morning silence. And then next poem I wrote during the week of Thanksgiving. And in 2018 was the year that the town of Paradise in Northern California burned down. And it burned during the month of the month of November. So this poem does reference that. November 3. The eve of Thanksgiving, and my mother texts from Baton Rouge that Will's showing pictures from their trip to Europe, just like our grandfather used to do, sitting us down for hours in their living room in Prescott, the slides in black and white projected on the screen. This year, it's just the two of us and steaks for dinner. 20 years or more since my brothers and I have gathered for a holiday I miss for a moment. Yet the rain has cleared, the smoke from the fires north, 95% containment now. And the next day we sit out drinking coffee in the early morning, reading that turns into talking, and a fresh morning bun. And then I'm going to finish up with the last poem in the book, December 4. Last week of the year, waking to Santa baby, come on down the chimney to me, singing Christmas carols, sharing a songbook with my mom, stealing secret Santa gifts and winding up with Shakespearean insult Band-Aids, eating biscuits and gravy for brunch and shrimp tacos for dinner with two of my oldest friends on the same day, telling my mother what I've always wanted to say, she's a hero to me, seeing her off at the airport, trying to keep her tears from falling with promises to see you soon, undressing the tree, storing the ornaments away until next Christmas. A dream of making pizza pies for a retreat in India without the ingredients, which I used for something else, then wanting to die, like those dreams of drinking, then waking relieved I'm still sober, waking relieved I want to live, discovering windows where there had been walls during this last week of the year. Thanks so much.
Thank you both. Thank you both for such wonderful poetry. And both of your work is so prescient to today with, you know, with your mom being a teacher and education being under attack, and Catherine with the old earth and the promise of the new earth that seems so shiny. So, Leah talked a little bit about what inspired her work. Catherine, what inspired yours?
You know, I wrote poetry when I was a young kid, and even like off and on, up through college and everything. And then I became, a mom, and I was working, and I didn't write poetry. And then about 20, probably 25 years ago, or 20 or 25 years ago now. Yeah, it's, you lose track of time. But anyway, I was sitting there and I just said, I want to write poetry again. So I started just, you're just staring at the blank page, basically. I mean, how do you start? And so I couldn't figure out how to start, really. So I went online. At that point, I was able to go online and check some things out. And then I found the Marin Poetry Center. It's a local poetry center. And I thought, I think I need to join something. I need to find out what's going on so I can, I'll try to write, but I was just writing awful stuff, And it's funny because I was an English major and I really was very literary. I mean, I love to read and I love poetry and everything, but the thing that really helped me get started was going to readings and events at the Marin Poetry Center. And then they said, they were looking for volunteers, and they said, hey, we need an editor for our anthology. They have an annual anthology, and they were just trying to get volunteers, basically. And I just said, yeah, I'll do it, because because of technical publishing, I knew something about publishing. So I even thought to myself, hey, if I'm an editor and I'm getting submissions, I'm going to see what people are writing and who they're submitting to. I'm going to learn a lot by doing that. By volunteering, I'm going to be on this have to go to meetings, of course, and talk to other people. But being part of this is going to really be like a learning thing. And this is going to get me into it, And I was right. I mean, it was just a great experience. So I was the editor for about 5 years for the Marin Poetry Center anthology from 2005 to 2010. And then I handed it off to another really good poet named Joe Zaccardi, who just passed away. He eventually became the Marin County Poet Laureate, highly regarded. But, that experience, and during that time while I was the editor, I also decided I need to hopefully find some poetry groups that I can join. And I forget how that happened, but somehow, by going to readings, I met other poets, and they'd say, oh, we have a group, and I think they heard, I must have read something or something too, some of my poems, even though at that point, I didn't think they were that great, but people would say, hey, why don't you join our poetry group? So one of those groups that I joined, I'm still a member of. It was based in San Francisco, and we meet at a house, and did that for many years until COVID just decimated everything. And then we went to Zoom, just like everybody. And we're still on Zoom for that particular group, but I have two other groups that I go to that I've been going to for quite some time. And now we're meeting in person again, which is really great. So, getting the critique and just, sometimes I'll just bring really rough stuff. It's not finished by any means, right? But you bring it to the group and you get feedback, and they give you ideas. So I know I'm giving you a lot to think about here, because I think the biggest inspiration in addition to the world and what's going on, and there's so much, is the poetry community and connecting with the poetry community. That's been extremely helpful to me and helped me figure out that, oh, I'd like to submit and I'd like to do a book, and, all this kind of stuff that happens when you really get involved with poetry.
Well, poetry is probably going to save us. If not, it'll keep us from going insane during this time.
It's helpful, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So, Leanne, how did you approach? Well, and I'm going to ask Kathy the same question later. How did you approach the work? Did you actually write every day? How long did you spend writing every day? Talk a little bit about your process, especially since your book is gathering the pieces of the day.
Well, like I said in the preface, I was sitting at the dining room table, and I decided I like to give myself projects. And so I said, I'm going to write a page every day this year. And it has to be about the day before. And so that's what I did for a year. And then after that year, I went back and I picked out the little pieces that kind of spoke to me. And I created a poem for every week of the year. And that took about a year or more to write, and then to revise. And I have a poetry group too. And, I brought it to my group and worked with them on it. And then that's how the book got put together.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, because probably by doing that, you record things that you may have forgotten about otherwise.
Yeah.
Because how many people remember the minutia of the day before, much less the year before, of the day, the days of the year before.
Yeah, I've never done it since, but I did it for 1 year, and it did teach me to pay attention to those moments, because and especially I think right now, like, it's those moments that are going to get me through the day and get me through what's really devastating, the things that are happening in the country. And so having those moments where I pay attention enough to even just a cup of coffee or a chat with a friend or a flower blooming, things that seem minor are actually what feed my soul. So
it's almost a radical idea to find things that are joyful, like a flower blooming, because right now the powers that be want us to remain in fear, and instead you each look for joy, and that's pretty much a radical idea compared to what else is going on, and that's what fuels us. So Catherine, talk about, there was it seems like your poems had a couple of groupings, the ecological ones, and then the ones about motherhood. So talk a little bit about, because they seem related.
Yeah. My people have said that my poems do have you know, a lot of themes with the domestic, and then they kind of branch out into ecology because of the world that we're living in. This is my second book with Unsolicited Press, my second full-length collection. And I
Wow.
have about 3 other chapbooks. And, you know, how I start putting together a book is I don't think of a theme. Just to be honest with you, I do not think of a theme ahead of time. With my first one, it was a handmade chapbook by a press in Berkeley, California. And a friend of mine referred me to the publisher. And I had these poems. And with a chapbook, you don't have to have sections or chapters. So that was like maybe 30 pages. That was a great experience to do a chapbook first, so that that kind of got you the idea of, you know, how you put something together. And I did a couple more chapbooks. I did one with this press called Dancing Girl Press. It's a feminist press out of Chicago. Actually, I've got 2 chapbooks with them, and I've got a third one coming out probably later this year. But anyway, so with my first debut, you know, poetry book with Unsolicited Press, I just created a Word file in a manuscript format with a table of contents. And once I started getting poems published, you know, that I submitted to magazines, I said, I've got to put a book together. So, like I said, no theme. This is going to be, I'm going to accumulate these poems in this manuscript. And then I'm going to go in using Word and fool around with them, you know, with the table of contents. I'm going to create sections. It may be sections, maybe not, but ultimately I did create sections. And I must have worked on that. Oh, I'm sure it was at least a year, more or more. I mean, it takes a long time. You know, you're submitting poems to magazines, getting rejections, getting acceptances, I was doing readings. I've got my poetry groups. And I found, I was submitting to some presses, getting rejections. And then there were some presses my friends were published at, and I said, I don't really like how that press sounds. Just, I won't name names, but I go, that sounds like, I don't know how they're doing. You know, I wasn't attracted to the press. Somehow, I can't even remember how I found Unsolicited Press, to be honest with you. I cannot even remember. But I found them. I went to their homepage. I went, wow, I really like what they're saying. And I looked at my manuscript. Do I have enough? I really worked on trying to organize it, do the table of contents, the Word file. I knew that I had good acknowledgments, you know, that I could publish in some good places. I thought I had something here. And so I submitted this to, that was called Genealogy Lesson for the Laity. And if I had to do over again, I would just call it Genealogy Lesson, and then in small print, for the laity, because it's a mouthful. I realize that. What emerged was a theme of the domestic, our genealogy, meaning, you know, how we all have ancestors and, you know, relations, the human condition, that type of thing. Even some motherhood comes in there. There's always some motherhood. So there was sort of a theme. So anyway, I submitted it to Unsolicited Press to have them just help me with the manuscript, because you could pay them at that point to look over the manuscript and give you suggestions. And Summer, the managing editor, came back and she said, I really love this manuscript. We'd like to publish it. And I was so surprised. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And she also gave me really good feedback. She had recommendations about what to get rid of and maybe write some more poems on another, you know, sort of the theme a little bit and some things to switch around. And that's my first publication, how it happened. Now, with the second one, with Ghost Matinee, again, no theme, poems that I've been writing after these are, new poems. Some of them I did pick up from my earlier chapbooks, because I have some real favorite poems in these very small run chapbooks that nobody's really seen. I mean, chapbooks are like ephemera. You don't really have a wide distribution. So I took maybe 4 or 5 poems that I liked from my previous chapbooks, and I included them in here because I felt they worked. But the rest of the writing in here is all new. It's after pretty much, after genealogy lesson, and no theme. This time as I wrote poems that I liked, and as I wrote poems that got accepted, I put them in my Word manuscript file. It's like a template with its table of contents, page numbers. It's got the title page, and I didn't know, I just had a working title. I didn't know what I was going to call it at that point. And I just kept building it and building it. And that took at least, oh my God, that probably took a couple of years, really, to be honest with you. Because my first full-length book was published in 2020. And, the pandemic hit and destroyed everything, made it really difficult. And this book is coming out, look at that, 5 years later, because it just takes a while, it took a while to develop this, to do the submissions, to go through the whole process. And I guess that's pretty much, I don't want to discourage people, but I'd say, it's pretty miraculous if you could get a book out every 2 years. That's pushing it a lot. A lot of people, you'll see what happens with poets. If they're on a roll, this time with Ghost Matinee, there were periods when I was completely on a roll. I couldn't get the words out fast enough. And then other times when I'm just sitting there going, what? And I go back in and revise and fool things around, fool around with my stuff. Yeah, it's you just can't force the muse and force the whole process, really. And I know I'm getting older, so I think you sort of have this sense of urgency that you would like to really have things move along faster, but my experience is it doesn't work that way. So
yeah, I think a lot of writers can relate to that. There are some poems and stories that seem to be born easily, have an easy labor, and then there's others that just, you labor over, and it's a hard birth of that piece of work, whether it's a poem or a short story or a chapter section. But I have always found that the harder the birth, the better the work later. It later has a wide resonance and stuff. So you're talking a lot of emerging writers or aspiring writers listen to our show. So what are some things or some advice, both of you, that you want to give to these writers on writing, on the writing life, on the discipline of writing, on the publishing process, whatever? I do think a lot of aspiring writers think about publication more than they think about the craft. But so what are some advice that you have?
If you really love writing, don't give up. Don't give up. It was a long road to publication for me. I always wrote poetry, but I started out with fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a couple of novels in a drawer. Actually, they're in this cabinet over here. I don't know if you'll ever see the light of day. But one came very close to getting published, and then things just didn't work out. And so eventually I put all the fiction aside, and I started focusing solely on poetry. But this has been like a 30-year, I was writing in my 20s, and I'm 61 now. So in my first book, this is my first book. I have a small chapbook that came out last year. But so you just have to keep going and find a community, find a writing group. I've been with the same poetry group for 20 years, and I really don't know if I would still be writing if I didn't have a poetry group, because I have to show up with a poem or a revision of a poem. And so it keeps me writing. And I also, where I met Kathy was actually in a group that we write together. We meet 4 times a year and write together. And that has also kept me engaged. So I really think finding a community, publishing is great. And, I still get lots of rejections, tons. I've gotten several, a lot this year so far. So, it's part of it, but you just keep putting stuff out, but focus on the writing first and then the publishing. So that would
Very
be
wise words. Very wise words. Kathy, what is your advice?
Yeah, I really agree with great advice from Leanne. I mean, you really have to have material. If you don't have material, you can't do anything. So, you must focus on the writing. You must try everything. You can free write, you can write flash, like maybe set yourself up for a 500 word maximum and have a thought and just don't even do line breaks, but you need to have material that you can work with. You've got to have notes. You've got to be a writer first. And, if you don't have that, then you can't publish anything. What are you going to have? You're not going to have anything. It's going to be shallow. So my recommendation is just like Leanne's saying, the community forces you to bring something to the table. That's been helpful for me. If you have those groups, you have to do something. You've got to bring something, or you can't be part of, you really can't be part of the community. I really rarely, I think maybe 1 or 2 times I've shown up with saying, oh, I don't have a poem tonight. It can be pure crap, but I have something, because everybody wants to hear something. They want to hear your thoughts or what you have, even if it's half baked. I mean it, because you can have a good laugh anyway. You can just say, okay, I'm trying. This is the thing, this is what I'm trying to do. And I just sit down. Sometimes you just stare at the blank page. Sometimes I get a lot of inspiration by reading other poets, and I get a line that goes, oh yeah, I really like that. Obviously there are world situations going on. You could do a rant, and then later you'll say, oh, I don't want to just rant at people. I'd like to maybe refine that a little bit. What could I do? Metaphor, or do something that gets the message across. It's not just a pure rant, but at least you're writing, and you could write about, we have so much childhood, whether it's a wonderful childhood, traumatic childhood, anything. People, love to hear, though. They love to hear a combination of stories. They love surrealistic, magical stuff that takes them out of this world. That's wonderful. So it's great to just really, really let your imagination run wild and see what you come up with, and not judge yourself while you're doing it.
That is very good advice too. Story is one of the oldest things that humans have ever done, tell stories. And it was not always, while they were not always written, it was oral. There's a great oral tradition to which poetry belongs. With the ballads and the minstrels and things like that. It's only, I think, only recently in human history that poetry has been written down. I think the Greeks may have started with the poetry of the myths and their stories, which were all in poetry and stuff. So speaking about poetry, do you prefer free form? Do you study structures? Do you like try to challenge yourself with sonnets or writing, what is it, iambic pentameter? So how do you approach the craft and structure of poetry?
I think the poem determines that. I'm not a formalist. I don't write a lot of formal poetry. I really write mostly free verse.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm,
but I like to play with shapes and stuff. And so I've written, my chapbook is all visual poetry. So
mm-hmm.
it's called Punctuated, and it's about punctuation. I'm an editor too. So it's about marks of punctuation, but literally and metaphorically, and they're shaped like the marks of punctuation.
Oh, wow, that sounds very interesting.
So I really love playing with the visual sense of poetry.
Mm-hmm,
Um, and then in the book, I started writing contrapunctuals, which are poems that can be read basically in three ways. It's two columns, and you could read each as a separate poem, or you can read across the columns. And I don't know where Jory Graham does a little bit of that, where she has the line breaks and plays a lot with how the poem is on the page. And so I decided to do that. And it's also kind of a way to get out of the straight narrative and to kind of
mm-hmm,
switch it up. It gets a little bit more surreal, a little bit
mm-hmm.
more odd. You can catch some really great relationships. Um, so yeah, I yeah, that's my 2 cents. I've done a few villanelles here and there, but
They're called villanelles. I mean, that sounds really interesting. I think Ezra Pound might have started that
yeah,
with his um, with his poetry and his punctuation and staying away from uppercase letters. But punctuation really intrigues me because a lot of people don't realize how important punctuation is. I have a motto: punctuation saves the world
yeah.
or
Well,
saves lives.
send me your address and I'll send you a copy of the chapbook.
Oh, that would be wonderful. And what about I wanted to say something about one of your poems. You talked about two trees that had an intimacy with each other, the two poplar trees. Um, there's a book called The Inner Lives of Trees, and
Oh,
trees
yeah.
actually do have intimacies with each other, and they're parent trees and offspring trees, and they communicate through their roots. So your poem brought that to mind, and I was like, what a lovely
Yeah.
image, because the trees cannot run away from each other. They're
Right.
stuck in one place.
That's true. Yeah. I do think there is a great value in understanding and studying formal, as much about poetry as you can. If you're serious about poetry, yeah, I tend to do, free verse. I love to do that. But I also have experimented with different forms, and I even experimented with the form that Leanne is talking about. But I didn't realize that you did so many of those because it's really difficult to do that. But when you're in a rut, a lot of times experimenting with a form like a pantoum or a ghazal can really help you get out of that. Or even trying to write a loose sonnet, that can really help you kind of get out of your rut. And I think that, how they say that just you can break rules if you know the rules,
Hmm.
it's kind of helpful. But hey, it looks like we're almost at the end of our little chat
We
time
are,
here.
but that's okay.
Yeah.
Keep going. We have a few minutes of grace, so
Okay.
finish what you're
Yeah, but
saying.
I think this has been great. I love the discussion, and I love listening to Leanne read her poems. It's
Oh,
wonderful.
I love listening to you read your poems. I
Thank
made
Well,
you.
me
both of the poems, even though the topics were different, they seemed related almost, because they're both talking about the things that happen in the days that are ordinary and that people forget or are haunted by. So in that way, they're connected.
yeah.
You
Hmm.
know, and and the poetry was just very beautiful. So I am inspired every week, every other week when this happens. I would like to tell our listeners that our next Literary Nights with Unsolicited Press is set for the 16th of April. We hope you'll join us, 5:30 Pacific time, 8:30 Eastern time. And I would like to thank Leanne and Kathy for sharing their beautiful poetry with us this evening. We hope that all of you listeners out there and viewers are as inspired, and maybe you will tackle poetry in your time. So, with that, we say goodnight, everyone, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.